We have breaking news on a highly anticipated decision from the Supreme Court. Let's go straight there. Our justice correspondent Jessica Schneider is with me. Good morning, Jessica.
Well, good morning, Poppy. You know, as we're approaching the end of the term here, a lot of big cases, and right now we just got one of those much anticipated cases. This is the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. And this was the case, of course, where that baker refused to bake a custom cake for a same-sex couple, saying that it violated his freedom of religion as well as his free speech. Well, we're just getting the opinion from the court now, and it appears that the court here has upheld the baker's right to refuse to make that custom cake for that same-sex couple. Now, again, this opinion has just come down, so our crew is parsing through all of the language here, but this is an opinion that has been written by Justice Anthony Kennedy. And of course, you'll remember that Justice Kennedy was also the justice that drafted the majority opinion in Obergefell, which granted same-sex couples the right to marry nationwide. So, you know, going back to some of the facts of this case, this was a case out of Colorado where a same-sex couple wanted to get married. They went to a local bake shop and they asked this cake maker to specifically make a custom cake for their wedding. Well, the baker said it would violate my religious beliefs if I were to use my skills as a baker to make this custom cake for you, and I refused. So this went through the lower court process. It also went through the the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, and it determined whether or not this was discriminatory, and this went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the question here is, can you violate some of these anti-discrimination laws at the state level purely because of your religious beliefs? And while we are still going through some of the language here to see how narrowly this decision came down, it appears that by this ruling, yes, in fact, if you are someone like this Colorado cake maker, you can refuse to make a cake, to use your artistic abilities and your skills to facilitate a same-sex couple's requests. Again, this was a very contested case because you have these anti-discrimination laws in effect in various states throughout the country, including this particular case in Colorado. But the baker here saying, look, my constitutional rights should be paramount here. I should be able to exercise my religious beliefs and not make this cake. So, Poppy, a very big decision that we've been waiting for to come down. It has come down today. So the Supreme Court weighing in on this, Justice Anthony Kennedy, he is the one who has written this majority opinion here, saying that the baker has within his rights under the freedom of religion to not make this cake for this same-sex couple. So, Poppy, I'm still waiting to get a little bit more of the details here, a little bit more of the language from this opinion, but a very big decision just now coming down from the Supreme Court. Poppy?
Jessica Schneider, it is indeed. I appreciate you laying it all out for us. I will let you read that majority opinion by Justice Kennedy and come back to us with more as you have it. Let me bring in our legal analyst, Paul Callan, again with me. This is a very significant, one of the top 3 most highly anticipated decisions to come from the court this term. Let's talk about the majority opinion by Kennedy in just a moment, but lay out the significance of this and the precedent that it sets.
It's very important because the Supreme Court has already ruled, using the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution, of course, that gay marriage is a protected right now throughout the United States. So this now deals with other issues. Can local stores and local a bake shop like this engage in some act of discrimination against gay people in the United States? And what this decision is important for is that it's weighing the rights of religion, which of course are protected under the U.S. Constitution, as opposed to the Equal Protection Clause, which says that all citizens have the right to be treated equally under U.S. law. So you've got these big constitutional principles at play here in this particular case involving the making of a cake in a small bake shop.
And we know that the Supreme Court has ruled narrowly in favor of this cake baker. And again, the argument here by the state, Paul, was that it was not about free speech, but a refusal to serve a certain class of citizens, and that the court disagreed with that. The court disagreed with that assertion, and it's very notable that Justice Kennedy, who was long expected to be the deciding vote in this, that it was a 6-2 ruling I'm just seeing now. He was expected to be a critical vote in this. that he wrote the majority opinion, because he also wrote the majority opinion in 2015 in the famous Obergefell and Hodges case on same-sex marriage. And that line, the striking line from that opinion, was they, meaning gay couples, ask for equal dignity in the eyes of the law. The Constitution grants them this right. And yet he wrote this majority opinion.
Yes, and of course it's important to look that this is Justice Kennedy making the decision, because he's often a swing vote between the conservatives and liberals on the court. He's hard to predict sometimes, and you've pointed out one great example of that. You would have thought Kennedy would go the other way on this decision, given his prior history. But I think what you find with these constitutional principles, it's one thing when you're talking about the state, which issues marriage certificates, saying we're not going to issue them for gay people. The court says that's an action of the government, and the government can't discriminate against classes of people unless there's what they call a compelling state interest. This, on the other hand, is a local bake shop. And I'm sure that they probably articulate a very different standard and say, you know, the implications of this decision are less important than the other big decision involving gay marriage.
Paul Callan, stay with us. Joining me on the phone is our chief legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin. Jeffrey, you and I have talked about this case a lot when the court took it up. The significance of this case on the merits, and then also the fact that Justice Kennedy came down the way he did and that he wrote the majority opinion.
Well, this is an enormous defeat for the gay rights movement, because the question now is what are the limits in terms of religious people when they're allowed to discriminate. I mean, here we have a cake baker who says, I don't want to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple. Well, what about the restaurant owner who says, I don't want to seat a gay couple because it violates my religious principles? What about the hotel owner who says, I don't want to rent a room to a gay couple because it violates my religious principles? The issue here, it was, as presented to the court, was that cake baking is such a unique, creative task and occupation that it was essentially like forcing a novelist to write a novel. It was like forcing a painter to paint a painting. That's the limiting principle that the court is applying here, because the court said, cake baking is such a unique, creative process that the government can't force someone to violate their conscience. The question is, what is the limiting principle there? There will be future cases. I mean, this is certainly an invitation to people who discriminate against gay people from barring them from their businesses.
Jeffrey Toobin.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want you to weigh in on one of the key quotes thus far in the majority opinion by Kennedy. He's talking about Jack Phillips, the cake baker here. And let me read this to you and get your take. The commission's hostility was inconsistent with the First Amendment's guarantee that our laws be applied in a manner that is neutral towards religion. Phillips, the cake baker, was entitled to a neutral decision maker who would give full and fair consideration to his religious objection as he sought to assert it in all of the circumstances in which the case was presented, considered, and decided. And the court held, the commission, they're talking about the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. This is the court saying that commission showed hostility towards the cake baker on his religious beliefs. Jeffrey.
That's right, and there was some dialogue, a transcript where Justice Kennedy during the oral argument was very concerned about this, that indicated that the commission in charge of enforcing the anti-discrimination law was hostile to the president, to the baker's religious beliefs. Obviously, no one should be hostile to people's religious beliefs, but as always in difficult constitutional questions, this is a question of balancing competing rights. I mean, you do have the religious conviction of the baker, which no doubt was sincere, but we also have a principle of religious discrimination. Of discrimination against gay people. And again, you have to search for the limiting principles. There are religions that hold that interracial marriages are a violation of God's law. So can you refuse to bake a cake for an interracial couple? Can you refuse to bake a cake for two people of different religions who are marrying each other? I mean, there are all sorts of religious principles
so to that point,
are against the laws on the books. And the question is, how much and how often and under what circumstances do people who have religious objections to laws on the books, how much do they get to excuse them?
So, Jeffrey, exactly to that point of how far does this go, the precedent that this sets, what doors does it open and what doors remain closed? Here's another part of the majority opinion that has just come down. Quote, the outcome of cases like this in other circumstances must await further elaboration in the courts, all in the context of recognizing that these disputes must be resolved with tolerance, without undue disrespect to sincere religious beliefs, and without subjecting gay persons to indignities when they seek goods and services in an open market. That also coming from Kennedy, Jeffrey.
Well, I think that certainly lays out the dilemma and the problem in the case. But it is also an invitation to more cases. It's an invitation to religious people to say, well, I don't want you to do your wedding cake business. I don't want your restaurant business. I don't want your hotel business. I don't want you in my store. I don't want you, that's we're going to see more cases. And obviously, Kennedy is aware of the problem that gay people will be subjected to indignity, and dignity is a favorite word of Justice Kennedy, something he's very concerned about. But it's also, dignity is a very vague and elastic concept, and there were a lot of people who believed that the customers of the Masterpiece Bake Shop were treated in an undignified way, to be turned away when they wanted a wedding cake. So, the fact that Justice Kennedy says people who have, that we have to have respect for the dignity of gay people, well, the gay people lost this one, and we'll see if they lose more of them.